We're 4 days away, folks, from the West Virginia Mountaineers heading into Happy Valley to take on the Penn State Nittany Lions in what could be, if they can pull it off, the biggest upset in Mountaineer football history. Can they do it? Mountaineer Paul and I are here to talk about it right after this word from our sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. What is up, college sports fans, Big 12 fans, fellow members of Mountaineer Nation? Welcome in to another edition of Couz's Corner. Belly yourself up to the bar and let me serve you up a shot of top-shelf college football content on tap today. I'm joined by my friend and partner, Mountaineer Paul, from Mountaineer Paul Talks Football. How you doing, Paul?
Doing well, man. Knee deep in it. Research today. We're going to talk a lot about that and be kind of excited to talk about it.
Right. First thing I want to do is show you guys the ESPN matchup predictor has changed slightly since this game was first announced. West Virginia's chances to win have increased from 9% to 11%. 9% to 11%. So looking a little better. But as you can see, Penn State's chances to win are 88.8% according to ESPN. So with that, I want to talk about now some key positions for Penn State and West Virginia, some key matchups. First off, Paul, I mean, are you pretty confident that Drew Allar is going to play quarterback, or Allar? I don't pronounce his name, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, everything that, Franklin is a guy that here's how he views it. There's no benefit in sharing the starters with you because that doesn't help us win. And that right there is the mindset he takes into everything he does at a press conference. I've watched about 10 press conferences on him the last couple of days, just different ones, just seeing if I could get any kind of nuance, to see if I could get any tells, just anything.
Right.
I can tell you this, when he really respects an opponent, he has a certain tone. When he doesn't, he has a certain tone. I don't know if he knows it, if he doesn't care or what, but Drew Allar is the guy. And it's going to be their guy. They mark data for, just like West Virginia does, for incompletions, completions, interceptions, but also almost interceptions. And he said he's had very few, if not zero, of those throughout fall and summer.
Yeah, and
he's played really well.
Yeah, and just to touch Drew Allar, just to give you guys some quick stats, he did play last year. In some previous videos, I made an error and said he was a redshirt freshman. He's not. He played in 10 games last year, so he's a sophomore. But he was 35 of 60 passing for 344 yards, which is and 4 touchdowns, had a 58.3% completion percentage, 0 interceptions. So he does have experience. He has played in Power 5 football games. He's not coming into this completely green. But speaking of green, he's not as experienced as our Greene, Garrett Greene, who we think is probably going to be the starter for West Virginia. Who would you give the edge to, Paul, in the quarterback versus quarterback matchup right now?
Well, I think the situation where the arm talent goes to Drew Allar, who has first round ability in the arm. He is I call him he's a less athletic version of a Josh Allen, right? And that's the way I look at him. But Garrett Greene obviously has the legs, so I think you split that. Obviously, Garrett does have the experience on his side, but Drew Allar has the better overall offensive team around him at this point. He's got basically 2 C.J. Donaldsons, 2 R1 in the backfield, and he's got Dante Cephas, who's fighting for a top 4 spot at receiver because they're loaded with 4 and 5 star talent at receiver. They just haven't made a mark yet, and so Cephas, who's used to playing against MAC talent, comes in and struggles against their, quite honestly, really, really good corners. And it's been interesting to hear him talk about that and how there's just so much talent on this team, that a guy like Cephas, who's an All-American, can barely crack the 4 deep.
Yeah. That is, well, Field Steele's expecting him to start. So I don't know. I guess it depends on what outlet you're looking at. But they got that transfer from Florida State, too, who's probably going to contribute for him some. The number one receiver, based on what Field Steele says, is probably going to be a guy who's back from last year named Keandre Lambert-Smith, who caught 24 balls for 389 yards and 4 touchdowns last year, averaged 16.2 yards per catch. And some of the highlights I went back and watched from last season, he's a deep threat guy. He caught a lot of deep passes for touchdowns, was able to find himself open behind the safeties in the corners for a lot of over-the-top stuff. So our DBs are going to have to be ready for that matchup. And obviously, and interestingly enough, Dante Cephas, who transferred, who's at Penn State at receiver and may start, but will at least play some, we expect, if he doesn't start, could potentially get matched up with Montre Miller, who is a former teammate of his at Kent State as well. Now, I'm not expecting Montre Miller to start, but I do think you'll see some playing time. I don't think they brought him in to sit.
No.
And but anyway, and also Penn State's running attack is probably going to be the one thing they're going to focus on, I would imagine, on the offensive side of the ball. They've got 2 great running backs, both sophomores too. A little side note here. This team is extremely young, man. That's scary. They went 11-2 last year, and the majority of their team is back, and a lot of those guys will be back again next year. They should be able to make a college football playoff run within the next couple of years, in my opinion. But anyway, I digress. Back to the running backs. They've got Nick Singleton, who who went over 1,000 yards last year as a freshman. And then they've got Katron Allen, another freshman or sophomore who was a freshman last year, went over 867. Both of those guys have really good speed. They can both make you miss with one cut. And if you do not tackle these guys and you do not use sound fundamental tackling, they will break long runs on you all night long. So, West Virginia has talked about how they've worked a lot more on tackling this offseason than they did last offseason. They're going to need it because these running backs will absolutely burn you. Paul, what are your thoughts on those 2 backs?
Well, they're both 5-star elite guys. They just don't. Penn State is lucky, man, to have both of these guys, and I'm sure they'll go with whoever the hot hand is. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Katron Allen is more like C.J. Donaldson. He's a guy that's a power back that has some speed to him. Singleton is – we don't have anybody on our roster like Singleton at any position. He'll probably be the best athlete on the field as far as long speed and agility goes, and that's really saying something. That starts for Penn State. You can make a case for Theo Johnson as well, but I would say it's probably Singleton.
Yeah.
Just an absolute dog. And he's the one I'm more scared of because he can change the scoreboard immediately as to where Katron Allen will wear you down over the course of the game, break off 20 and 30-yard runs.
Right.
They're both scary in their own right to play against.
Yeah. And Katron Allen, even though he's a bigger back, his cutting ability in the highlights I watched, he can cut like a little guy, man. He can make you
side
miss.
to side.
Yeah, he doesn't have the breakaway speed that Singleton has, but he does have some wiggle to him, especially for a big guy. And of course, they'll be matched up with West Virginia's linebackers. Obviously, the middle linebacker is going to be Lee Koba, who I am expecting big things from this year. 6'1", 235 there in the middle. He was a JUCO transfer last year, led the team in tackles with just under 100 tackles. Did find himself in the wrong position a lot last year, especially in the passing game, but it's year 2 in the system. He's expected to potentially be an all Big 12 guy. I have high hopes for him there in the middle. And the weak side backer spot, though, Paul, for West Virginia is a little bit of a question mark right now. We've got a lot of young bodies competing for that spot with Trey Lathan, Jairo Faveras, and true freshman Ben Cutter. All indications are that it will likely be Trey Lathan that comes out of camp as the starter. So, Paul, what are your thoughts about how our linebackers match up with Penn State's running backs?
Well, obviously, we've got 2 spots that we think are probably solidified, and you've already gone over that. But obviously, Trey Lathan and Faveras, I think they're probably going to split time. They're probably going to have to work them in and out and see who does best with what. The one thing about Trey Lathan, at least on tape from high school, he was really good in pass coverage because he was so slight. He's really put a lot of weight onto his frame. The thing that worries me the most is he going to be big enough? Because I mean, you look at not only the running backs, especially Katron Allen, but once we move to the tight ends, which is, in my opinion, the most talked about thing about this game going into it, is going to be both my X factors are at the tight end spot for Penn State. They're going to be matched up with them too. We'll get into that in a minute, but I do think it's going to be Trey Lathan that eventually wins this job for the long term. But Faveras, he's going to play too. He's got so much experience, special teams guy his entire career. They think he was ready to make that step. We'll see if he, maybe he gets a hot hand and plays well. I'm not going to, because he's a foreign guy. It's taken him a while to adapt. Maybe that's why.
Yeah. He's from the Netherlands, by the way. For those Penn State fans who may be watching, Gyro, it may be Favors, but it's Gyro Favors, I think is his name. He's a redshirt sophomore linebacker, 6', 220. He's competing with redshirt freshman Trey Lathan for that weak side linebacker spot. Lathan is 6'1", 225. Our linebacking core is not very big. They all range anywhere from that 225 to 235 range for the most part. Now, we do have a true freshman, Josiah Trotter, who likely would have been a factor there this year, but unfortunately he suffered a season-ending knee injury. He would have been our biggest linebacker at about 240. So, but like I said, he's out. So, I want to touch a minute. We didn't really touch on the how our DBs. I mentioned that there are a couple of their wide receivers, but I didn't mention our DBs. Normally, I would say this is the biggest question mark on Penn State's offense, and it probably still is. However, we also have question marks, meaning West Virginia as well. So at the DB spot, we lost the two guys who started there last year. Both were transfers, were grad transfers who came in last year from lower level schools. Unfortunately, they did not play very well, and we got more transfers in this year. We think they'll be better though. We've got Beanie Bishop, who we got from Minnesota. He's actually played against Penn State, so he knows what it takes to play at this level and against this kind of talent. We've got him at the corner spot, and we expect the other corner will likely be Andrew Wilson-Lamp, who is a 6'2", long, lanky guy who can run. They said he's probably one of the fastest guys on the team. And, of course, we've got some veterans back there, too, with Malachi Ruffin, or a veteran in Malachi Ruffin. Not sure where he'll play or whether he'll start, because just like James Franklin, rather, Neal Brown hasn't released a depth chart, so we don't exactly know who the starters are. We're just kind of speculating at this point. But you never know how these transfers are going to pan out, man. We think Benny Bishop's going to be good. We think Andrew Wilson-Lamp, who's a third-year guy in the program, we think he's going to be good, but we really don't know yet. And until the bright lights come on and they're out there in front of 106,000, you don't know how they're going to perform. So I think West Virginia has a chance to at least break even there in that position battle, but we'll see. What do you think?
I agree. I do think. I mean, look, they've got probably the better athletes, but they're still so young. I think they're probably still a year away from being true threats, like you would see like a Cephas, like that kind of name power, staying power. Mm-hmm. So I think our DBs, I could see us breaking even there in that aspect. Get to the safeties though. And that's another story for today.
And that's where we're going next. This is the matchup that scares me the most. And Paul, I was actually, when you sent me that message earlier, I had actually already started doing some research on the tight end position at West Virginia, or at Penn State rather. And it scares me, man. They've got two guys that are really good. They got Theo Johnson and they got Tyler Warren. Both guys are 6'6". Theo Johnson had 328 yards catching a year ago, and Warren had 123. Both of those scare me, man. And I've even seen them. I even seen one formation where they lined up two backs in the backfield with Tyler Warren in between them as a blocker. I mean, they utilize these guys really well and in various ways. And I know you've got some graphics to put up with these guys, and so go ahead and throw those up and talk about it.
I actually got these graphics from the Penn State YouTube channel. So if you guys want those graphics, go to Penn State's YouTube channel. It's a video titled "How Should the Penn State Offense Attack West Virginia?" And I really honestly got a lot of this info from that, although I had considered this. Once this gentleman put it together, really made a lot of sense, and I was glad to come on Couz's show and share it with you guys as well if you haven't already seen it. Also, I want to talk about Khalil Dinkins as well. He's a 6'4" guy. He's their third tight end. he would start at West Virginia this year. That's how good their tight ends are. But here are the graphics, guys. Against two deep last year, tight ends went off against West Virginia. Jatavion Sanders had 5 catches for 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ben Sims and Drake Dabney at Baylor had 7 for 84. Sammy Willard, and we all know Ben Sennett, who was at K-State that looked like a fullback, 5 for 129. And also against Too High, 19 catches, 320 yards, and 4 touchdowns were the tight ends from Penn State last year. So you add those two into the equation. What does that mean? Well, it means that our safeties didn't play well. It means our linebackers didn't play well last year against tight ends. Penn
Right.
State's tight ends did. We've got 2 new safeties, except Aubrey Burks will be coming back. Obviously, Keyshawn Cobb and Anthony Wilson, I think, are going to be 2 guys that rotate in and out. They've obviously, the talk of camp has been Anthony Wilson. He is not a coverage guy. I mean, he can play coverage, and he did play coverage. He's a tackler. He's a form, come up and hit you in the box, run support kind of safety.
Carl Joseph. Carl Joseph.
Similar to Carl Joseph.
Yeah.
I don't know that he matches up well at 5'9", 190 with Theo Johnson, 6'6", 260.
It's definitely a concern.
That runs a 4.5. Oh, It's my main concern. Theo Johnson is for sure the X factor for Penn State. They're going to get in 12 personnel. The last time we saw it was against K-State. And for those of you who don't know what 11 personnel, 12 personnel is, 11 personnel is 1 tight end dotted with a running back in the backfield. 12 personnel is 2 tight ends and a running back in the backfield. And those are usually run-heavy formations. Penn State can go 13 personnel, 3 tight ends, and they probably will. So I would expect those lineups. K-State put, what they hang on us last year, 40-something?
About 41, 42, something like that.
And they did it methodically. It wasn't like that. I mean, they had some explosive plays, and obviously Deuce Vaughn is a different animal than Singleton or Allen. But similarly, lined up behind, obviously we haven't even got in the offensive line for Penn State yet, but they line up behind a really good offensive line, and they just wear you down over the course, and they feel like they can run at us because they feel like schematically, take the players out of the equation. The kind of defense that West Virginia runs is to stop Big 12 teams. It's not to stop Big 10 teams. And so schematically, there are just flaws in this defense that power running teams can exploit.
They often line their linebackers up 8-10 yards off the ball, off the line of scrimmage, meaning West Virginia. There are times they will only have 1 or 2 linebackers in the box. Hope to God they don't do that too often against Penn State. But when you look at the safeties for West Virginia, I mean, you mentioned Anthony Wilson at 5'9", Aubrey Burks, who likely will play in the NFL one day. 5'11", he's only 5'11", 204. You've got Keyshawn Cobb at 5'10", Marcus Floyd at 6 foot. I think he's the tallest one. I'll take it back. You've got Lance Dixon, who actually was a transfer from Penn State a couple of years ago. He stands 6'2", 223. So he's going to have the best shot. Like when he plays that spear position, which is kind of a safety linebacker.
Sam linebacker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like a Sam linebacker, is what Penn State fans would know it as. But, you know, he can cover, but, man, he's still giving up 4 inches to these guys. So they're just matchup nightmares. And I hope Jordan Leslie and this defensive staff has gotten put together a good game plan to try to stop these guys, because if not, it could be a long night. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the offensive line versus West Virginia's defensive line, and then take a look at the defensive side of the ball for Penn State. Unfortunately, Mountaineer Paul could not join me for the second half of this video due to personal reasons, but we will move on. When you look at Penn State's offensive line against West Virginia's defensive line, it all starts with Olu Fashanu, the best left tackle in all of college football. Fashanu could have been drafted early in the NFL draft last year, decided, unfortunately for my Mountaineers, to come back for his senior year. So he's going to be a force to be reckoned with there at the left tackle spot. Now, also with him, you've got 2 guys who missed part of last season, who were originally starters, that are now back this season after suffering season-ending injuries last year. So they have about 66 starts returning on that Penn State offensive front. Now, that's not as impressive as what you hear about West Virginia with, like, I think they have 130-some starts returning. But even though it's only 66, it's 66 really good starts. Even with 2 starters out with injuries last year for most of the season, or about half the season, they still open holes for 181 yards per game for those 2 stud backs in Singleton and Allen, and they only gave up 20 sacks. And with those 2 starters returning this year, Fashanu coming back for another year, they should be even better. So they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And when you look on the other side of the ball at West Virginia's defensive front, they lose the key, the anchor, the cog to that, not only the defense, but really the whole team last year in Dante Stills. He was drafted by the Arizona Cardinals, is now in the NFL. So West Virginia is going to have to be sort of a defensive line by committee more this year. They're not really going to have one stud up there. They're going to have several guys that are going to have to contribute and just play good team defense up front. They are going to rely a lot on Sean Martin. He is a guy who started most of the year last year, took over the starting role from Taj Alston at defensive end about 3 or 4 games into the season. Martin's a 6'5", 290-pound defensive end. He's very talented, very long, very big, can come off the end and get some pressure and use those long arms. And hopefully he'll be able to get to Drew Allar and create some havoc in the backfield. I think he ended last year with about 4.5 sacks. He's expected to take a major step up this year and really be the leader, not only of that defensive front, but maybe of the entire defense. Also up front, you've got nose tackle Mike Lockhart, who's replacing Jordan Jefferson, who transferred to LSU. Lockhart is likely going to be the starter there as part of this 3-man front that West Virginia runs. He is a transfer. He came in last year, transferred over from Georgia Tech, came in a little bit heavy, so didn't get to play as many snaps as he probably would have liked. This year he's trimmed down, gotten in better shape, and they said he's playing much more physical, and his conditioning is much better, so he should be able to hold down that nose tackle role. But if he can't, they have a couple guys behind him who are very capable. One Penn State fans may recognize, Fatorma Mulba, who transferred from the Nittany Lions over to the Mountaineers in the offseason. He's a big body up there that can take up space. And then we've got Hammond Russell also as a backup nose. And then at the defensive tackle spot, which is where Dante Stills was at, we're relying on Edward Vestarin, and he's a foreign player who Neal Brown got in the part of the 2021 class. We're expecting him to fill that starting role left by Stills. He's a guy who's really grown and learned in the program. They're expecting big things out of him this year. Backing him up is likely a transfer named Devon Hawkins, who's from Tennessee Tech. And I know what you're thinking. Tennessee Tech, who in the world's at? Yeah, they're a small school. But Devon Hawkins, this guy can play some ball. He has a really high motor. He's really good coming off the edge. Really good, has good quick hands, and can get to the quarterback. We're expecting big things from him. It might be in a backup role to start the year, but I think he may press Edward Vestarin for that starting role by the time the season's over. That's how high I am on this young man. He had a really great spring game. Was arguably the best player on the defensive side of the ball in that spring game this year for the Mountaineers. So. Now, I know it's a spring game, so who knows how much that really means, but we are excited about him in Morgantown. And then, when you look at the depth of the West Virginia defensive line, they go 8 or 9 guys deep more than likely. So they will be able to bring guys in and keep guys fresh, hopefully, which hopefully will help them take on that talented front line for Penn State. But at the end of the day, I'm probably giving the advantage here to Penn State because they're just so talented, especially with Olu Fashanu manning that left tackle spot. Now, let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball for Penn State versus West Virginia's offense. When you look defensively at Penn State, their defensive front, it's a 4-man front. Primarily, the biggest man up there, the biggest star up there is Chop Robinson. Yes, Chop's a nickname. I can't pronounce his first name. But nonetheless, he was a transfer over from Maryland a year ago. Last year, he had 26 tackles and 5.5 sacks for the Nittany Lions. He has great speed coming off the edge and is a force to be reckoned with there at that end spot. Now, more than likely, Wyatt Milam, West Virginia's left tackle, will be charged with blocking him. I have a lot of faith in Wyatt Milam. He's played against some first-round draft picks in his day, and he's done a really good job. Wyatt Milam will likely be in the NFL himself one day. So I think he'll be able to hold his own there. It's not going to be easy, and I'm sure he'll get beat a few times. But he's also going to win some one-on-ones too against Robinson. So that's a matchup I'm looking forward to. On the other end for Penn State, you have Adisa Isaac, who had 28 tackles, 4 sacks, and 7 TFLs a year ago. He'll likely be facing another West Virginia offensive lineman that's likely to play in the NFL in Doug Nestor. Doug Nestor is a 5th, maybe even 6th-year senior who transferred from Virginia Tech a few years ago. Both of those guys, Milam and Nestor, are West Virginia guys. And then anchoring West Virginia's offensive line is Zach Frazier, All-American candidate at center, who will likely also get drafted in the NFL. He's probably going to be one of the top 2 or 3 centers coming out, if not the best center coming out in the draft this year. Very high expectations for him. Very, very talented guy. Former high school wrestling star. He's able to use that leverage that he learned in wrestling there up front. He's very good with his hands also due to his wrestling background. So if here, I actually am going to give West Virginia a slight advantage here only because of Zach Frazier. And I think if there's a weakness, and it's a big if there's a weakness on this defensive front for Penn State, it's in the middle. And we've got Zach Frazier at left guard. We've got Tomas Remak, even though he's a redshirt freshman, but he has a starting experience under his belt from last year. And then on the right side, it'll either be Jaquay Hubbard or Brandon Yates. Both of those guys also have a lot of starting experience. I expect both of those guys to get snaps. So I give West Virginia maybe a slight advantage. At very worst, I think we break even on that defensive front because I do think Wyatt Milam and Doug Nestor will be able to hold their own on the ends with those pass rushers from Penn State. And then keep in mind, West Virginia will have a mobile quarterback finally this year. Even if Nico Marchiol ends up being a starter over Garrett Greene, he can also move well with his feet and avoid the pass rush if needed. Now, when you look at the linebacker core for Penn State, you've got Abdul Carter and Curtis Jacobs, 2 absolute studs in the middle there. Both guys have speed and are really good at rushing. They will come at you from all different gaps, man. I've watched highlights. They will come at you up the middle, up the A gap, B gap. They can come around the end and get you. They're really fast, really athletic, man. And they are really good at going sideline to sideline, chasing down the ball carriers. Very, very talented, very, very athletic guys in the middle. Going to be a tough task for these West Virginia linemen when they're trying to get downhill and block at the second level. And also a tough task for these West Virginia running backs to block. And speaking of West Virginia's running backs, when you look at the matchup between that's going to be a tough matchup, West Virginia's running backs versus Penn State's linebackers. West Virginia, we talked about Singleton and Allen, Penn State's talented backs. Well, West Virginia's got some talented backs of their own, led by C.J. Donaldson, a guy who ran for over 500 yards last year in just 7 games as a true freshman. And the reason it was only 7 games is because of injury. He missed several games with injury. He's going to be leading this rushing attack for the Mountaineers. He stands 6'2", about 240 pounds. Very hard guy to tackle, but he's also shifty enough that he can make you miss if he needs to as well. Former wide receiver in high school that was recruited to play tight end at West Virginia. He ended up moving to the backfield because of need and ended up being a star there. Behind him, we've got Jalen Anderson, a former 4-star recruit. We have Justin Johnson, another former 4-star recruit. And, oh, by the way, we have a true freshman that you guys better get to know. Not sure how much he'll play in this game, but he will play throughout the season. His name is Jaheim White. He was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school. He's kind of small in stature. Probably only stands about 5'7" or 5'8". He can flat out make you miss. He's fast. He's shifty. I'm really excited about this young man. He's one of the very young, talented players on this team for West Virginia, especially on that offensive side of the ball. But look for C.J. Donaldson to do big things. And according to offensive coordinator, running backs coach Chad Scott, he would like to get C.J. Donaldson at least 15 touches in this game. When I say touches, he's also very good because of his receiving background. He can catch the ball out of the backfield as well, asking most of these backs for West Virginia. And they are much improved blockers as well. That's going to be really important, not only in the run game, but also in the pass game. Let's go to the secondary for Penn State. Again, very, very talented. According to Phil Steele, this is arguably the most talented secondary in the country. Led by another NFL caliber player, Kalen King. Very, very talented corner there at Penn State. Keep your eyes on Kalen King. He's going to be all over the place. I expect he will likely be locked up in coverage on Devin Carter for West Virginia. I'll be anxious to see if that's the case or not, because Devin Carter will likely be lining up on the right side of the field, and I'm pretty confident Kalen King is the left corner for the Penn State Nittany Lions. So that'll be an interesting one-on-one battle to watch in this game. Is Devin Carter for West Virginia, who's a transfer from NC State, big body receiver who's good at making plays downfield, using his body to get separation, going up against Kalen King, the very talented DB from Penn State. I think he had 3 picks last year. Heck, West Virginia only had 4 as a team. This guy had 3 on his own. So very, very talented guy. That'll be a good matchup to see. And then at safety for Penn State, you've got Jalen Reed and Keaton Ellis. Just 2 more good players on this team. This Penn State defense is absolutely loaded. I mean, top to bottom. When you looked at Bruce Feldman's freaks list, where he lists all the top 100 freaks in college football, Penn State had 6 guys on that list. Most teams are lucky to get 1 or 2 on it. They had 6, more than any team in the country. And guys, that's out of 100 total football players in the nation. There's over 100 players on each individual team. So there's a lot of players out there. And they had 6 on this list off their roster. 5 of those 6 were from the defensive side of the ball. That's how good this defense is. It will be the best defense West Virginia plays all year, bar none. Not even close, in my opinion. Not even close. So, going to be a tough one. Now, as far as matching up with the DBs, I mentioned Devin Carter for West Virginia. We also expect Cortez Braham, another receiver for West Virginia, to step up and catch a lot of balls for us for the Mountaineers this year. He's a JUCO transfer that came in last year. With these JUCO players, it usually takes these guys at least 2 years to get comfortable, and that a lot of times they'll break out in year 2. We had a receiver several years ago, most of you know, named Kevin White. He was a Biletnikoff Award finalist, but he did that in his second year in the program after coming in from the JUCO level. That's just one example. Cortez Braham could be that next guy to step up. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Kevin White, but I do think he'll step up and catch 30, 40 balls from the Mountaineers this year and really be a downfield threat for us. We brought in a couple other transfers. I mentioned Devin Carter. We also brought in Jashawn Polk, a smaller stature receiver to play the slot position. And then we brought in E.J. Horton, a speedy downfield guy from Marshall, somebody that can take the top off the defense for you. And then we've got 2 really good true freshman receivers, 2 4-star kids, or young men, I should say, in Traylon Ray. And then one you all will be familiar with, Rodney Gallagher. Neal Brown has said Rodney Gallagher will play in this game. He doesn't know how much. But Rodney Gallagher has come even further than they expected him to as a true freshman. For those of you who follow the recruiting of Rodney Gallagher, you know he's a small-statured guy. He's not real big. He has put on about 12 to 15 pounds of weight, which has enabled him to be able to get on the field earlier than expected, and he will contribute to this team early on. As to how much, we will see. And then Traylon Ray is another young freshman that we're expecting big things out of going forward, who didn't get to campus in Morgantown until late summer because he was playing baseball at his high school. He was a baseball star, and he played baseball all through June. Didn't get to campus till late June, early July, and has already been one of the top receivers at practice for several days. Several days of camp, he was a top guy. So we're expecting big things out of him. He has been sick some this week, so I'm not sure. He'll have to get healthy and get to feeling better before he'll see action. But it's very possible you could see both of those true freshmen on the field at some point in this game. Maybe not the same time, but they will likely both get snaps depending on how the game goes. And then at the tight end spot, got to cover tight ends for West Virginia. West Virginia has not utilized the tight end position well enough over the years. I think that changes this year. Coach Brown and his staff went out and got Cole Taylor, a 6'7" tight end from LSU. He's 6'7". He needs to put a little bit more weight on his bones. He's not as big as the receivers at Penn State, or the tight ends at Penn State, I should say, but he can make plays. He's got really good hands. He's big. He's tall. He gives them a really good target in the red zone, and then he should also be able to make some plays down the field for them as well, especially in that intermediate passing game. And then we have blocking tight end in Traylon Davis, who can catch a ball if needed, but that's not going to be his primary goal or his primary job. His primary job would be an extra blocker in there and an extra lineman to help handle some of those Penn State linebackers. So, again, when you look at the receivers versus the DBs, I'm giving the edge there to Penn State. And the only reason I'm saying that is because we have so many unknowns at West Virginia, so many transfers, so many guys who didn't play a lot last year that we're depending on this year. I have confidence they'll step up, but let's keep in mind they're going against the top defensive secondary, arguably in the country. So it's going to be a really tough road to hoe for these guys. And then when you look at the battle between the safeties for Penn State and the tight ends for West Virginia, I could go either way here, but I'm just going to give it to Penn State just because, again, until the West Virginia coaching staff proves to me that they're going to utilize the tight end and utilize the tight end well, I just don't have faith that they're going to do it. It's one of those deals I need to see it to believe it. I hope they do, and I think we've got the talented guys to do it, but they just got to go out and do it. So I'm giving the edge to Penn State there. Now, to my score prediction. It's a night game on NBC. Penn State's expected to have one of the largest crowds in their history. It'll probably, it'll be close to 107,000, maybe even more. Like I said, televised at night on NBC. It'll be NBC's first time NBC's ever broadcast a Penn State football game. There'll be a lot of eyes on this game. It's going to be very, very loud there inside Beaver Stadium. West Virginia is a team with a lot of questions. I do have faith they'll be better this year. But you got two programs in two totally different spots. You've got Penn State, who many are picking to go to the college football playoff, versus West Virginia, who has a coach on the hot seat. On paper, this Penn State team is going to be the most talented team West Virginia plays all year. I'm definitely giving the edge to Penn State. Now, do I think they cover the spread? Last time I checked the spread, it was 19.5. Do I think they cover the spread? I don't. I do think West Virginia will be able to keep this game close early on. I think West Virginia will either make a mistake maybe late in the game, or Penn State may force a turnover late or something and get points off of it, which will create more points for Penn State and help them pull away late. Therefore, I'm taking Penn State 31-17 in this game to win it over West Virginia. So there again, 31, Penn State 31, West Virginia 17 is my final score prediction. I want to hear your score prediction in the comment section. You let me know what you think about this game. Who wins? Does Penn State cover? And West Virginia fans, what can West Virginia do to not only stay in this game, but to win it? What do you think they need to do in order to win this game for them to even have a chance? Also, guys, don't forget to please give me the thumbs up on this video if you enjoyed it. Give me the thumbs down if you didn't. Be sure to share it out with your family, friends who like college football, especially if they're West Virginia fans. Or, hey, if you got Penn State fans out there who want to hear an unbiased, even though I'm a West Virginia fan, I'm trying my best here to give an unbiased preview of this game. Share it out with your Penn State friends and family as well. Please subscribe to the channel here if you haven't yet. I'm trying to get to my next big goal of 10,000. I need your help to do that. Guys, if you want to support the show, if you want to support me financially, there are several ways you can do it. Scrolling along the bottom are the names of my pub level channel members. That's the introductory level. Earlier, I had the club level members, which is level 2. There are a lot of perks that go along with the membership. Hit the join button below to find out what those are. You can check out my merch store. You can make a one-time donation by checking out the links in my description box for Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Or you can hit the heart button with a $sign in it right below. Make a one-time donation that way. With that being said, guys, I really appreciate you tuning into this episode. And until the next one, Q Country Roads.